Hey there, welcome to Science Fridays. I'm out here in the Walnut Creek open space today to show you guys a little bit about how to identify birds and what kind of bird species you can find out here. We're also going to learn about how you can help scientists by logging what birds you identify while hiking or walking on your own. For that, we're going to use a couple apps, one to identify and one to give your data to scientists. Let's take a look at those now. There are two tools that we can use on our phones to track our birding activities and to help us out. One of those is called Merlin Bird ID and the other is called EBird. We're going to open up Merlin Bird ID since that's going to help us figure out what bird we're looking at. When you get in, you're going to see a pretty standard menu. This has three options to start bird ID, get photo ID, or explore birds. Before we can start IDing birds, we're going to need to download some bird packs, which contain all of the birds for a specific area. You're going to click the top three bars at the left, scroll down to where it says bird packs, and click there. There may be an automatic tutorial for you that will get you to load up bird packs on your first time in. As you can see, I've already got the West Coast installed. I do need to update, so simple as that. I'm just going to click my update button and then I will be ready to go. Now this is the US West Coast map, but there are quite a few more. While we update here, let's take a look at what exists in this one. So we have Australia, Brazil, Canada, the Caribbean, Chile, tons and tons in here. Pretty much every region in the world is going to have a bird guide associated with it. If you're taking a trip to Iceland, if you're taking a trip to India, all you have to do is come on here and hit get on the bird pack for that area, and then you're good to identify those birds offline once you get to that country. Once your bird pack is downloaded and you see a bird that you want to identify, all you have to do is click the Start Bird ID button. Once you do that, it's going to ask you where you are. It's very important for Bird ID to know this so that it can figure out what kinds of birds are present in your area at that time of the year. You can click Current Location, and then it's going to ask you when you saw the bird. It's going to default to today's date, so you can just click Next. The next thing it's going to ask is what size was the bird. It's going to give you a few options. On the left is sparrow-sized or smaller. On the right is goose-sized or larger. And then there's everything in between. The example bird that we're going to use is going to be called the white-tailed kite. This guy is about crow size, so we're going to click crow size. The next question is going to ask what are the main colors that you saw on the bird. You can select up to 3 of those colors. For our bird, the white-tailed kite, we're going to select gray, black, and white. The final question asks, what was the bird doing? This is very important as most birds are going to engage in similar behavior as a species. Some of these may be familiar, and some of them may not be. Eating at a feeder, you probably recognize. Swimming or wading would be something that you see ducks doing. On the ground would mean that it's standing on some solid ground and pecking at it usually. In trees or bushes would mean it's perched somewhere in those, on a fence or a wire, soaring or flying. All of those are pretty simple at the end and describe exactly what you're looking for from the bird. Our species, the white-tailed kite, is usually going to be found soaring or flying. Remember, this app is to identify the birds, so even though I'm using an example bird right now, you don't have to know what the bird does, only what you see the bird you're trying to identify doing. Once we put in all of these features, it's going to give us a list of birds to go through that it thinks match our criteria. The first one we see here is the Caspian tern. We can swipe through the photos and see how closely it matches our bird. As you can see in most of these pictures of the Caspian tern, it has a bright red bill. But the bird I'm thinking of that I saw in our example did not have a red bill. So we're going to move on because it probably isn't going to be this bird. Once you confirm that that's not the bird you're looking for, just scroll down to the next option. Check through the pictures again to see if you have a match. And like I said before, the colors that I saw on this bird was gray, white, and black. This picture of the bird, though, has some brown. If we look at the bottom left, it'll tell us what life stage the bird is at, and this one is at juvenile in this picture. Juveniles are child birds, so they're not as common as adults. So if we didn't see a bird that matched this one, that's not as much of a big deal. Let's keep going through the pictures. The rest of these pictures seem to match pretty well to what I saw. So that means this is probably going to be the white-tailed kite. And like I said, that's the one we were using as an example, so it's good to see that it showed up here. If you heard the bird, you can click the speaker button on the bottom left and hear what the bird sounds like. If all the pictures match and the call matches, you can be pretty sure that this is the bird you were looking at. And you can answer the question at the bottom, yes, this is my bird. When you click that button, it's going to say congratulations, you identified, and the species of bird you identified. You can click under its picture to explore more details about the species and learn a little bit more about the bird that you saw. If you want to save it to eBird, which we'll look at next, you can click Share this ID and it'll add it to your eBird list. Speaking of eBird, let's take a look. Unlike Merlin, eBird is not an app to help you identify birds. It's an app to record what you see while on hikes, in the field, or just walking along the street. Let's open up the app and get started. You're going to need to sign in with your Cornell Lab account or make one. You just click Create Account at the bottom, put your name, username, password, and email address, and create a free account. Once you log in, it's going to ask you for a few preferences. You can decide if you want to display the species name by their common, scientific, or both names. I'm going to select both, and then it's going to tell me if I want to have the common or the scientific name display first. And then it's going to ask for your language, how you want to show distances, or if you want to show subspecies. Select whatever you prefer, and then hit continue. Once you get in here, we'll also need a bird pack for this app. So you can click View Suggested Packs and see what it thinks you should have for the area where you're using your phone. For this one, we want California, US. All you have to do is click that and wait for it to install. Once you've got your bird pack installed, it's going to direct you to the screen that you'll normally see when you want to start a bird list, or in terminology for eBird, a track. Here you can tell it what date you went bird watching on and what time you started walking at. These are two very important details so that scientists know what times these birds are out and what times these birds are active. Once you've clicked all of those things, you're going to click Start Checklist and it'll bring you up a big list of birds. It's going to auto-select your location up at the top. Later, you're going to tell it exactly where you were. When you see a bird and identify it, maybe using Merlin, you can look up the species name or you can scroll down the list to find it. In this case, we can say we identified our white-tailed kite. When I type it in up here though, nothing comes up. The reason for this is there is a dash between white and tailed. If you can't find it and you're not sure where the dashes go, try searching just for the first word and scrolling down the list. Type in white, and then I can scroll down the list and I see my white-tailed kite. Once you click on it, it's going to turn the number to 1. If you saw more than that, you can click that number again. You can also click on that bird again so that you can change the numbers here. Once you get more familiar with bird behavior, you could also add a breeding code, but for now, you don't have to worry about it. So let's say we just observed one, and if you have any comments about it, any strange things you noticed, you could write them there. Once you log your bird, you can continue on your hike or walk and add any more birds you see. After you finish your walk, you're going to click Stop Track, and then it will ask you a few more questions. The most important question is going to be the location where you were. If you were in a state park, let's say Mount Diablo State Park for example, you could choose that as your location. It has a little triangle there and it won't let you press continue until you do so. If there were more observers, you could add more observers. If the time is off from what you actually spent out in the field, you can modify that as well. You can also add how many miles you were walking, or you can leave it as stationary like we have here. It's also going to ask you the question, is this a complete checklist of the birds you were able to identify? If it is, then you're going to click yes. If you saw some birds, you identified them, and you didn't really want to add them to the app, make sure you click no. In this case, we'll click yes. We've seen how to use Merlin Bird ID and how to use eBird. We're going to go identify some birds. If you're able to download Merlin in the course of this video, you can pull out your phone, open up the app, and see if you can identify them before I make the identification. The first bird we'll look at is called the red-winged blackbird. This is going to be the easiest bird for us to identify because of its bright red wing caps. At least for the males, they are going to show these during mating season. Females are going to be a brown color and a little bit harder to identify because of that. Males will do everything they can to get noticed, so you'll often see them standing on high perches, like the ones we see here, and their red wings are going to help with that. Our next bird species is the acorn woodpecker. It's pretty common in the area we live, so it's very likely that you've seen them or at least heard their pecking before. They peck at trees so that they can fit acorns into the holes they make and eat insects that live in the bark of the trees. These woodpeckers can be identified by the bright red cap on their head and their white faces. Acorn woodpeckers have a complex social hierarchy and you'll often see them together. The acorns they bury are also not just for them. They will actually share them with other acorn woodpeckers who help them store their acorns. You can find them in oak woodland forests and even in your neighborhoods where they may be putting acorns into the telephone poles. Now we are getting to birds that are a little more difficult to identify. As you can see, this bird doesn't really have any bright colors, but we can still tell a few things about it. One, it's got kind of a lump on its head. It also has a white belly, gray back, and a brown colored tail, which is only revealed when it flies from tree to tree. We can also look at the behavior of this bird and see that it's hovering over some grasses. That means it's probably going to be a flycatcher. And in fact, this is an ash-throated flycatcher. I only caught a few frames of this next bird, but if we pause here, we can see some very distinctive blue coloration on it. It also has a white belly at the bottom, and its chest is a brownish orange color. That brownish orange color is also present on its back. If we combine those three things, we can figure out that this guy is a western bluebird. The last bird we're going to look at is actually an invasive species, but it's pretty easy to identify by its mostly black body and its yellow bill. The one thing that might mix up a beginner birder is its call. These guys will actually copy other birds, so if we listen here, we'll hear quite a few different calls. Like I said earlier, this is an invasive species. It's called the European starling, and all European starlings in North America are descended from 100 birds which were set loose in the 1890s. The birds were intentionally released by a group who wanted America to have all the birds that Shakespeare ever mentioned. Now the population is taken off, and at one point there were so many starlings that swarms of them would blacken out the skies. These are just a few of the birds that are present in the area, and now that you know how to use Merlin, you can go out on your own and try to identify the birds that you see, and when you see them, log them on eBird so that you can help scientists discover new things about these cool animals. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next week for another Science Fridays.